Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into a topic that can genuinely transform our lives. It was just another typical morning at the security checkpoint for Sarah. She was standing by the entrance, keeping her usual routine, when she spotted her boss, Mr. Johnson, walking toward her. As always, she greeted him with a polite smile, but this time, something felt off. The way Mr. Johnson paused and looked at her was different. His sharp eyes narrowed, and for a moment she felt exposed, as if he could read her every thought. He stopped right in front of her, his gaze shifting to her face. "Sarah," Mr. Johnson said, his tone shifting to one of concern. "What's up? What's with those red marks on your face?" Sarah froze for a brief second, unsure of how to respond. She didn't want to explain what had happened. She didn't want to drag her boss into this mess, but the question had been asked. She didn't have a choice now. With a hesitant breath, she nodded and spoke up. "Oh, it's nothing, Mr. Johnson. Just a little issue with a new employee," she said, trying to downplay it, but it was obvious to Mr. Johnson that something deeper was going on. His frown deepened and he crossed his arms. "I don't buy it, Sarah. What happened? You don't get marks like that for nothing." Sarah sighed, her mind racing. She had been hoping to avoid a confrontation, but her boss wasn't going to let this go so easily. He could be intimidating when he wanted to, and Sarah knew that when he pressed for something, he wouldn't back down. "Well," she started, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "There's a new girl, Linda. She just joined the enterprise this week. I asked her to show her entry card as part of the usual protocol, and she lashed out at me." Sarah's voice faltered for a moment as she recalled the sudden aggressive behavior of the woman. "She twisted my arm, Mr. Johnson." The words seemed to hang in the air, and Mr. Johnson's face turned pale with disbelief. "She hit you?" he repeated, his voice tinged with shock. "Not exactly," Sarah quickly corrected. "More like, she attacked me physically, but it wasn't a proper hit. She's our supervisor's second wife, and I'm sure she thinks she can do whatever she wants. If I try to stop her, she threatens me, says she'll have her husband fire me." The frustration in Sarah's voice was evident. She didn't know how to handle the situation. The last thing she wanted was to be on the wrong side of her boss or cause any more trouble. But the idea of dealing with Linda's arrogance and the power dynamics surrounding her marriage was weighing heavily on Sarah's mind. Mr. Johnson's expression darkened, his fists clenching by his sides. That's unacceptable, Sarah. No one, especially not some entitled second wife, should treat you like that. You don't deserve to be bullied on your job. No one does." He paused for a moment, the wheels in his mind clearly turning. "All right, here's what we're going to do. Take the day off, Sarah. Go home. You don't need to be here today, and hand me your uniform." Sarah blinked in surprise. She wasn't expecting this reaction. "Wait, what? But I'm fine. I can manage. It's just, I don't want to make a scene." "No," Mr. Johnson said firmly. "This is not about making a scene. It's about standing up for yourself. You've been disrespected, and I'm not going to let that slide. I'll take care of things here. Give me your uniform. I'm handling this." Before Sarah could protest further, he quickly took off his own jacket and put on her security uniform. His transformation was immediate. The usually well-dressed boss now stood before her in a simple security guard's uniform, his posture just as commanding as it ever had been. Sarah stared, momentarily lost for words, but there was something reassuring about his confidence. She handed over her uniform to him, and without saying another word, she turned and left the building, unsure of what was to come next. The morning sun shone brightly as Linda arrived at the Enterprise, walking with an air of entitlement. She was clad in a fancy dress and a pair of high heels that clicked sharply on the pavement. Sarah's warning echoed in Mr. Johnson's mind, but he was ready. He stood at his post, waiting for the woman who thought she could walk in and out of the company without so much as a second glance. Linda approached the entrance, her eyes scanning the security desk. Her face twisted with confusion when she saw the guard in Sarah's uniform. She wasn't expecting to see a new face, and certainly not one that seemed so out of place. But she didn't care. She was Linda Adams, and that should have been enough. As she stepped forward, Mr. Johnson straightened up, blocking her way. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice calm but firm. "May I see your access card, please?" Linda scoffed and looked him up and down, her eyes narrowing with disdain. "How dare you question me for my card?" she snapped, pulling her handbag closer to her body like a shield. "Who do you think you are?" Without another word, she dug through her purse and produced the card, holding it out in front of him with a sense of superiority. Mr. Johnson didn't take the card immediately. Instead, he looked at it carefully, studying the details. His eyes flicked up to Linda's face, and with a tone of politeness that barely concealed his annoyance, he said, "Ma'am, this card doesn't belong to you." Linda's expression changed instantly. "What do you mean it doesn't belong to me?" she demanded, her voice rising. "This card's mine. How dare you speak to me like this?" Mr. Johnson kept his cool. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the name on the card isn't yours. You'll have to show me the correct identification if you wish to enter." Linda's face turned a shade of red, her eyes flaring with anger. "You don't know who I am, do you?" she said, her voice dripping with venom. "My husband is the manager here, and if you don't let me in right now, I'll have you fired before you can blink. You can kiss your job goodbye." Mr. Johnson remained unfazed. Instead of responding immediately, he pulled out his phone and pretended to dial a number. "I'll just report this to the boss right now," he said, his voice deliberately calm. Linda's eyes widened with disbelief. "What? You can't be serious," she stammered. "You're just a lowly security guard. Don't you dare call him." Before she could stop him, Mr. Johnson's phone slipped from his hand as she slapped it away, her fury now fully unleashed. "Do whatever you want," he said, his voice still steady. "But without the proper access card, you're not getting in." Linda's laugh was derisive as she mockingly danced in front of him, taunting him. "Just wait until my husband gets here. You'll be sorry. I'll have your job before the day is out." Without waiting for a response, Linda pulled out her own phone and dialed her husband, Mr. Adams. "There's a new guard here at the company who's misbehaving with me. You need to get here fast and make sure he lets me in." As she spoke, Mr. Johnson remained calm and composed, a silent challenge in his eyes. "I haven't done anything wrong," he muttered under his breath, but Linda wasn't listening. The air grew tense as the seconds ticked by. Mr. Adams, Linda's husband, arrived at the building in a rush. He stormed through the entrance with a look of authority, heading straight for the security desk. Linda pointed at Mr. Johnson, a look of triumph on her face as her husband came closer. But when Mr. Adams saw who was standing before him, his face turned a deep shade of red. His steps faltered for a moment. He stopped, and his confidence faltered. "What's the matter, boss?" Mr. Johnson said, his voice cool but challenging. "You came here to fight me?" The tension in the air was thick as Mr. Adams stood frozen in place. His earlier bravado disappeared, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. Linda, who had been brimming with confidence moments before, now felt a pang of unease as she watched her husband's reaction. Mr. Adams had clearly not expected the man standing before him to be the boss, and it was evident in the way he hesitated. Mr. Johnson, still standing firm in Sarah's uniform, regarded Mr. Adams with an almost clinical calmness. His eyes, sharp and focused, were fixed on the man who had once wielded his power over others without thought or consequence. But now, as Mr. Adams processed the truth, he was starting to understand the gravity of the situation. "So what's it going to be, Mr. Adams?" Mr. Johnson's voice was low, but carried authority. "Are you going to back up your wife's behavior, or are you going to take responsibility for this mess?" Mr. Adams opened his mouth, but no words came out. He closed it again, swallowing hard as the realization hit him. This wasn't just any guard. This was his boss, the man who controlled the entire company, the man who could make or break his career with a single word. His own arrogance had blinded him, and now he stood before the person he had disrespected in his own company, exposed and vulnerable. Linda, sensing the shift in power, tried to save face by forcing a smile. "Honey, I didn't know this was the boss," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." Mr. Johnson, unimpressed by her quick apology, folded his arms and raised an eyebrow. "No, you didn't. Did you?" His voice was ice cold now, each word cutting through the air like a knife. "But you certainly caused enough of it." Linda's face flushed with humiliation. She opened her mouth to respond, but Mr. Adams, now clearly mortified, stepped forward, his voice trembling with a forced politeness. "Boss, Mr. Johnson, please, I never meant for this to happen. This is my wife's fault. She's been a bit out of line lately, but I'll take full responsibility. Please don't let this affect her." The desperation in his voice was palpable, and Mr. Johnson's gaze hardened. "You'll take full responsibility? Is that so?" he asked, his tone still measured but laced with disappointment. "What I'm hearing here is a whole lot of excuses, and yet you stand by and let your wife treat people like this. You allowed this to happen." Mr. Adams opened his mouth again, but no words came. He was trapped, caught between trying to salvage his own reputation and the realization that he had, in fact, allowed his wife to behave this way. His failure to intervene when Linda had lashed out at Sarah was now glaringly clear, and the weight of his own negligence was sinking in. "Tell me," Mr. Johnson continued, his voice calm but laced with a quiet fury. "If you were in my position, how would you handle this?" For a moment, the silence between them felt suffocating. Mr. Adams could feel his pulse racing. There was no easy answer. He could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of his own failure suffocating him. I don't know," he admitted, his voice cracking. "But I understand now. I see what you mean, and I'm sorry I should have stepped in sooner." Mr. Johnson nodded slowly, accepting the apology, but not letting him off the hook so easily. "Sorry doesn't fix anything. Your wife's behavior has already caused problems, and I am not just talking about here. I am talking about the image of this company, the values we uphold. If I let something like this slide, what kind of message does that send?" Linda stood beside him, visibly shrinking under the weight of his words. She had been used to people bending to her will, people like Mr. Adams, who had always let her get away with whatever she wanted. But now, facing Mr. Johnson, she realized just how wrong she had been. The boss wasn't someone she could control or intimidate. He was someone who stood for something greater than all of them. "Linda," Mr. Johnson said, turning his gaze to her now. "Do you really think your husband would have let you get away with this if he was in a position of strength? Do you think the way you've treated people here is acceptable? You've already made a fool of yourself, but it's your husband's career on the line now. You think he can walk away from this without consequences?" Her face turned an even deeper shade of red, and for the first time Linda felt small. She had always prided herself on her ability to get what she wanted, but standing here in front of Mr. Johnson, she realized that power meant nothing without respect, and she had none for the people who worked alongside her, none for the people who kept this company running. I didn't realize," she stammered, her voice faltering. I thought I could just—" "You thought wrong," Mr. Johnson interrupted sharply. "Now, I'm going to tell you both something very clearly. I don't tolerate disrespect in my company. Not from employees, not from spouses, and certainly not from anyone who thinks they can get away with treating people like dirt." He took a step closer, his voice dropping low, a cold edge to every syllable. "Linda, your husband is the one who will pay the price for this. And don't think for 1 second that you're off the hook either. Because I don't care who you are or who you are remarried to. There are rules here, and they apply to everyone. The words landed like a punch to the gut, and for a moment, neither Mr. Adams nor Linda could respond. They simply stood there, caught in the weight of their own misdeeds. Finally, Mr. Johnson turned his gaze back to Mr. Adams, his tone shifting slightly. "As for you, Mr. Adams, I'm going to give you a choice. You can either take full responsibility for your wife's actions and put an end to this behavior, or you can let it slide. But if you let it slide, I'll have no choice but to reconsider your place in this company. You'll be held accountable, and I'll make sure you know exactly how far your negligence can go." Mr. Adams stood still for a moment, the weight of Mr. Johnson's words pressing down on him. He could feel the eyes of his wife on him, the silent expectation that he would fix this, that he would save them both. But deep down, he knew that this wasn't something he could just brush aside anymore. He had let things go too far, and now it was time to make a choice that would define his future. I understand," Mr. Adams said, his voice low but resolute. "I'll fix this. I'll make sure this never happens again." Mr. Johnson nodded, satisfied. "Good. That's the first step toward making things right." The silence that followed Mr. Adams's admission was deafening. For a brief moment, the tension seemed to stretch indefinitely between them. Mr. Johnson stood tall, his gaze unwavering. He was a man of few words, but everyone he spoke carried weight. His eyes, sharp and calculating, bore down on Mr. Adams as if weighing his sincerity. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and there was no turning back. "Good," Mr. Johnson finally said, breaking the silence. "Actions speak louder than words. We'll see how you handle this situation moving forward." Mr. Adams nodded, still trying to regain his composure. He turned to Linda, who had been silent since her attempt to deflect blame had failed. Her face was flushed with shame, the confidence she once held now completely shattered. She glanced at her husband, but there was no support, no defense. She had pushed too far, and now the consequences were clear. "I'll make sure it doesn't happen again," Mr. Adams said firmly, though there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. He could feel the weight of his words pressing against him, the gravity of his previous inaction now coming home to roost. Linda, on the other hand, still hadn't fully processed the impact of the confrontation. She had always been the one to dictate the rules, to manipulate situations to her advantage. But standing here in front of Mr. Johnson, her husband's boss, she finally understood that there were consequences to her actions. I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said quietly, almost apologetically. The defiance had drained from her voice, replaced by something softer, more vulnerable. "I was just trying to—" But she didn't know how to finish the sentence. Trying to what? Gain favor? Assert control? The words felt hollow in her mouth now. Mr. Johnson had made sure that there would be no excuses. "You were trying to get what you wanted," Mr. Johnson said, his voice cold and stern. "By stepping on others, by disregarding the rules that everyone else follows. And that's something I won't tolerate in this company from anyone." Linda lowered her gaze, feeling the sting of Mr. Johnson's words like a slap. Her bravado had disappeared, leaving only the realization that she had miscalculated everything. She had acted out of entitlement and arrogance, assuming that her marriage to a higher-up would shield her from accountability. Now it was clear that she was no different from anyone else. Mr. Adams looked at his wife, his expression hardening. "Linda," he said, his voice low, "I think you need to take responsibility for your actions too. This is a workplace, not some playground where you can do whatever you want. We're both responsible for what happened today." Linda opened her mouth to argue but closed it quickly when she saw the look in her husband's eyes. He wasn't defending her anymore. For the first time, she saw a flicker of disappointment in him, something deeper than just frustration. He was hurt, and perhaps even ashamed of what she had done. "Take a seat," Mr. Johnson ordered, his voice decisive. "Both of you." Linda and Mr. Adams, without protest, complied. sitting down on the bench just outside the security desk. Mr. Johnson took a step back and ran a hand through his hair, clearly processing everything that had transpired. He didn't enjoy these confrontations, but he knew they were necessary. It was not just about enforcing rules. It was about preserving the integrity of the company and the people who worked there. He turned his attention to Linda first. "You've caused a disruption here today, and not just in this building. You've shown a lack of respect, not only for Sarah but for everyone who works here. That kind of behavior can't be overlooked." Linda's face was pale now, and her eyes were averted, unwilling to meet Mr. Johnson's gaze. For the first time, she realized how fragile her position had been. The entitlement she had felt was nothing more than a fragile illusion, one that had crumbled in the face of actual authority. The power she had wielded in her personal life did not extend into the professional world. She could no longer hide behind her marriage or her husband's position. "You will need to apologize," Mr. Johnson continued, his tone unwavering. "Not just to Sarah, but to the whole team. You'll also need to reassess your attitude if you want to stay in this company. You may think you're above others, but you're not. No one is." Linda's mouth opened to protest, but the words caught in her throat. What could she say? Apologies now felt meaningless. She had crossed a line, and no amount of excuses or apologies could undo the damage she had done. "Consider this a warning," Mr. Johnson added, his voice sharp. "And if I hear of this happening again, you will be escorted out of here. I won't hesitate to take further action." Linda nodded stiffly, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. The fight had drained out of her, replaced by the realization that Mr. Johnson had already made up his mind. Mr. Johnson turned to Mr. Adams next. "As for you, Mr. Adams, you've been complicit in this, and that's not something I take lightly. But I'll give you a chance to fix this, to make things right. Your behavior here has reflected poorly on your leadership, and it's clear you have a lot to learn about respect for your colleagues and respect for this company." Mr. Adams nodded, his face reddening with embarrassment. He knew that Mr. Johnson was right. He had allowed his wife to get away with too much, turning a blind eye to her behavior because it suited him. Now he was paying the price. "I understand," he said, his voice quiet, "and I will make sure this never happens again." Mr. Johnson gave a short nod, indicating that the conversation was over. "Good. Now, I suggest you both leave. Linda, go home. You need to reflect on your actions. And Mr. Adams, I expect to see you in my office tomorrow morning. We have a lot to discuss." Without another word, he turned and walked back to his desk. Linda and Mr. Adams sat in stunned silence for a moment, the weight of what had just happened hanging heavily in the air. Linda stood first, her movements stiff and reluctant. She glanced at her husband, who still seemed to be processing everything. "I'll go," Linda said quietly, her voice small, drained of its earlier bravado. "But this isn't over. I'll make sure we—" "Don't," Mr. Adams cut her off, his tone flat. "Just don't." He turned to face Mr. Johnson as the boss sat down at his desk, his back turned to them. They had been given a chance to correct their mistakes, and they both knew that it was the only one they would get. The following morning, Mr. Adams sat nervously in Mr. Johnson's office, waiting for his meeting. He had spent the night reflecting on everything. The shame he felt, the disappointment in his own actions, and the realization that he had allowed his wife to undermine the values that he should have been upholding. The way he had let Linda's behavior slide had been a mistake, and now he was paying the price for it. Mr. Johnson entered the office, his expression stern but calm. "Mr. Adams," he began, sitting down behind his desk, "I'm going to give you a chance to turn things around. This company values integrity, teamwork, and respect. If you want to stay here, you need to show me that you can uphold those values, not just in your position, but in how you lead your household as well." Mr. Adams nodded, his mind clearer than it had been in days. He had a lot to prove, but he was determined to make it right. "I understand, Mr. Johnson, and I will." As he left the office, he felt a sense of clarity. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was a road he was finally ready to walk. For the first time, he understood the true meaning of leadership. And it wasn't just about power, it was about respect. Drop a heart-in comment, like and subscribe my channel, and visit my channel for more interesting stories videos.